Mythposter syndrome.
Hello and welcome back to my series Bridging the Gap, where we make functional play guides for new players looking to get into the endgame. My name's Myth, and this week we'll be discussing the mage class, Scholar. For this video, we'll be focusing on Scholar in the offensive magic mode called Dark Arts. For information as a healer, check out Part 1, which covers Light Arts. A Scholar using Dark Arts is commonly focused on two things: creating skill chains and doing magic damage in the form of helices and elemental nukes. This playstyle is often applied to Swordy Mage method runs, Odyssey Sheol JLNMs, and it can be very strong for soloing content as well. In order to be effective at this playstyle, the gear requirements are a bit higher than if you were only healing. Sets required to effectively skill chain and deal damage as a Scholar are an Idle set, a Fast Cast set, a Helix set, and a Magic Burst set. Other sets that are also needed are things like Enfeebling Magic sets, as well as all of the sets to function as a healer and support that were mentioned in Part 1 of this guide. Remember, just because you're focused on doing damage doesn't mean you can't support your party and provide heals as necessary. Now let's move on to job abilities. In order to perform anything we discuss in the video today, we'll be starting with the job ability Dark Arts, Scholar's Elemental and Dark Magic stance. Dark Arts grants a bonus to Dark, Elemental, and Enfeebling magics. It reduces the cast and recast time of those spells by 10%, while increasing the cast time of light magic spells by 20%. Dark Arts also gives access to linked job abilities that we'll discuss now. Each of these abilities consumes a stratagem. If you'd like more information about how stratagems function, see Part 1, or check the BG Wiki page on stratagems. Addendum Black is accessed under Dark Arts. It gives access to spells that Scholar wouldn't normally be able to access otherwise. Notable spells on that list are Tier 4 and 5 Elemental nukes, and utility spells like Sleep or Dispel. Addendum Black should almost always be utilized when using Dark Arts for any period of time. Ebullience is an ability that grants 20% damage bonus to your next black magic spell. It can be paired with the Empyrean +3 headpiece, and it can boost that damage to a total of 41%. This ability is extremely powerful and it can help overcome the nuke wall Scholar often faces when it's in a group with multiple people magic bursting. Manifestation turns single target enfeebling magic spells into area of effect. This ability gives Scholar a variety of unique crowd control options in order to take on groups of monsters. It also has some unique applications, such as pairing Manifestation with the spell Climaform to boost party damage, or pairing it with Aspire to drain MP from multiple monsters all at once. For a full list of compatible spells, I'll post the BG Wiki link below. Imminence is the job ability that makes Scholar irreplaceable in mage strategies. It allows spells to interact in skill chain as if they had their own level 1 skill chain properties. This means that a Scholar using Imminence can create its own skill chain and then magic burst it without even having to engage the monster. The next ability we'll discuss that can come in handy for a Dark Arts Scholar is Enlightenment. Unlike the others we've mentioned at this point, Enlightenment is not tied to Dark Arts. Instead, it is a merit ability that allows the casting of one spell from either the Addendum White or Addendum Black category. This can be extremely useful in a pinch in order to erase a debilitating debuff or raise a party member quickly if you want to save stratagems or avoid switching arts. The last job ability we'll discuss is Tabula Rasa, Scholar's first SP ability. Under Dark Arts, the biggest impact that this has is the ability to not consume stratagems while using abilities. This means that for 3 minutes, you can create unlimited skill chains. Certain mage fights like Ongo from Odyssey or Aita from Swordy hinge their strategy on this single ability. Tabula Rasa also gives you access to Kostra and Umbrava, which we'll discuss later in the video. Now we'll move on to spells that weren't discussed in Part 1. These spells are vital to dealing damage and functioning in a mage group as a Scholar. The first thing you want to be familiar with as a Scholar is the Helix line of spells. Helix spells are an incredibly strong damage over time spell that can do up to 9,999 damage to a monster every 10 seconds. This means that over a 90-second period, a Helix can do over 100,000 damage. It is often the first spell cast in a longer fight, as it can do hundreds of thousands of damage throughout the fight if it is reapplied. Helices are affected heavily by weather, which brings us to our next line of spells, Storms. Storm spells are a line of spells that are unique to Scholar. Tier 1 Storms give single weather effects, and Tier 2 give double weather effects. If you're unfamiliar with how weather interacts with magic damage, it's pretty simple. If the weather element aligns with the element of the spell that you are casting, it will have a 1/3 chance of boosting damage. If you use the appropriate elemental OB, this effect becomes a 100% chance of boosting damage. In a magic burst setup, it's important for a Scholar to know what element is being used so storms can be applied prior to fighting to increase the entire group's performance. Another unique spell to Scholar that boosts this effect is Climacform. Climacform increases magic accuracy for dark magic. It can be paired with the Empyrean feat to increase the magic damage of spells with the matching weather by 25%. That means that if you combine a Storm with an Elemental OB, Climacform with the Empyrean feat, and Ebullience with the Empyrean head, you can increase your own damage output by over 70%. Scholar also has access to several utility spells that can help a group. Break and Sleep are both excellent crowd control spells that Scholar gets access to under Addendum Black. When paired with Manifestation, they can come in handy to save a run from going sideways. Other spells like Gravity and Bind can also be useful, but they're tied to the Red Mage subjob. For the sake of time in this video, we'll skip over elemental tier nukes. If you have questions about those, they're discussed more thoroughly in my Black Mage guide. The last two spells we'll discuss are tied to Tabula Rasa. Embrava is by far the most common option of the two. It provides a very strong regen, refresh, haste, and flurry, and it is not dispellable. Even if you're focusing on damage in a fight, it is expected in most scenarios to use Embrava to help the group. Embrava's dark magic counterpart is Kostra. Kostra is essentially a stronger Helix. It deals dark magic and applies a damage over time debuff that can do up to 24,999 damage every 3 seconds. The spell is not as commonly used these days as it was before, but some fights, like Bumba V25, hinge on this specific spell. That covers dark magic spells, and remember that even though you're focusing on dealing damage in the scenario, spells like Protect, Shell, Haste, Regen, and Aquaveil should all be applied and maintained throughout the fight. Now we'll move on to some tips and tricks on how to make this all function a little more easily. Firstly, a pro Scholar needs to have a good command of how to skill chain. When performing in a Magic Burst setup, one way to increase damage potential is by closing an imminent skill chain with a Helix. This adds just a little bit of time to the Magic Burst window for you and others in your party to hit those big Magic Burst numbers. Another useful trick is to have a specific imminence set. The nuke wall mechanic is activated when 2500 damage has been dealt to a monster. If you accidentally hit this number by casting in a set that has a high magic damage potential, you're inadvertently giving the next caster a substantial damage penalty. Having a specific low damage imminence set will ensure that you do not accidentally nerf your party's damage. If you're trying to get into Sortie, you should know that there's one skill chain that's a bit better than the others. If you open a 2-step liquefaction skill chain, it can be extended one more time to make fusion. Fusion can then be extended by other party members to make a light skill chain. This gives your party more opportunities to nuke and deal out big chunks of damage when you're fighting monsters that need to go down as quickly as possible. The next thing a Scholar needs to have a firm control over is stratagem usage. With 550 job points, you only have 5 stratagems. For certain battlefields like Odyssey, it may be better to use things like re-raise items or single target buff spells instead of burning stratagems you may need to start the fight. Other ways to manage stratagems are switching between light and dark arts depending on where you are in the content. If you're in content like sortie, where you are running a lot, you can use the time immediately after a fight and the time spent running to use stratagems to buff your party members and let them come off cooldown during the run. Showing up to a basement boss with everyone buffed, Addendum Black ready to go, and 5 charged stratagems goes a long way into making sure that your group is successful. Time spent running is also a great time to charge sublimation if you expect to burn through a lot of MP when you get to give your best Black Mage impersonation. Now let's move on to macros. Trying to learn how different elements create skill chains as a scholar can be a daunting task. Luckily, with some prep time, you can make the macros do most of the work for you. There are 2 ways to do macros for a scholar. The first is by creating one macro that performs all of the actions for a completed skill chain. This entails putting all of the lines for a complete skill chain with wait timers into one macro. If you choose to go this route, please make sure you test your macros prior to group content. Last thing a group wants to hear when fighting a big bad in Sortie or Odyssey is, "I don't know why my macro isn't working." This option is often the simplest, however it is not my personal preference. If you're a button masher like me, you'll accidentally hit the macro twice or more, causing problems. Other things like lag can also cause these skill chains to not fire off properly. My preferred method is having an individual macro for each piece of the skill chain. This includes a macro for imminence, as well as a different macro for each step of the skill chain, as shown above. This method may seem more complicated, but it gives you more control over exactly what is going on as the scholar. You can choose to let magic burst windows go for longer periods of time to maximize damage, or if you need to change elements in a pinch, you have the power to cut the window short and continue the skill chain in a different element. The add-ons that I use for Scholar in this scenario are identical to what I use for Black Mage. The Skill Chains add-on shows what you can do to extend skill chains, as well as showing you the magic burst windows with a countdown timer. The Timers add-on is extremely important to manage stratagems. And lastly, the Shortcuts add-on allows you to type commands on the fly. I find this helpful and often find myself typing commands rather than using macros in order to provide support for the party while I'm in Dark Arts. Now we'll go over a start to finish fight example for a scholar performing in the Dark Arts stance. First and foremost, create a plan with your party. If you're providing the bulk of the skill chains, come prepared. Make a backup plan for when you run out of those stratagems. Show up with meds and make sure you can continue functioning if you are silenced or running low on MP. Remedies, vial elixirs, and panaceas are must-haves for a pro scholar. Prior to entering the content, apply buffs that can carry over. Oftentimes, things like Protect or Regen can be applied prior to fighting, and you can let those stratagems recharge while you're waiting to enter. If that's not an option, prioritize the buffs that are important to ensure that you have the stratagems to function for the fight. Don't forget to Storm and Climaform before the fight starts. Once fighting does start, make sure you communicate with your group when you're ready to skill chain. This can be done via an added text line in the macro or on Discord if you have that option. Once you've initiated the skill chain, it's often followed up by another party member extending it. At this time, you should be applying your Helix and nuking your heart out. If you have 2 Scholars or Tabula Rasa up, don't forget to use Ebullience to boost that damage when you have stratagems to spare. Throughout the fight, keep an eye on your front line. Oftentimes there is no white mage in this setup, so be ready to use Cure or use Enlightenment to get rid of a debilitating debuff. Remember to come prepared, be flexible, and strategize, and you can master the art of being a tactical mage. That's all we have for today. If you've enjoyed this video, feel free to reach out in-game or at my Twitch or via Discord on the link below. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.